All right, so happy noontime. We are going to get rolling. On the sheet from section 3.2 that I gave you last time, we got up through exercise 5. So what I would like you to do is this. Looking at exercise 6, I had mentioned to you last time that we know something's a circle when the coefficients in front of the x squared and the y squared, when they're the same and both positive. I'm not going to try to trick you on that on the test. I'm just sharing that information because on the My Math Lab homework, some of them will ask you, is this a circle or not? Because this is part of a bigger section and we're just doing the circle part to it. So when you're asked to find the center and the radius of this circle, we did completing the square, and I'm hoping you're feeling pretty good, but we're going to get a chance to review. Here's step number 1, and I'm going to give you 20 seconds to do step number 1 and feel good about it, and then we'll make sure when you see a coefficient in front of the x squared and y squared, we can't complete the square like that. Does anyone remember what I said at the very end of last time to do with that coefficient? Divide. So that 3, divide every single one of the terms by 3. And I'll give you just a few seconds to do that, and then we'll make sure you did it right, and then you can finish the problem. I wouldn't expect that any of you had a problem with this, but I just want to make sure we're all dealing with the same numbers. So I'm just going to go through, I'm dividing every single term by 3. And so 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. 3y squared divided by 3 is y squared. 54 divided by 3 is 18y. And then 240 divided by 3 is 80. And 0 divided by 3 is 0. So at this point, now you're going to just proceed like we did with the other problems. You group the x's, group the y's, complete the square, put it in the circle center radius form, and then tell me what the center and the radius are. Okay, so I'll give you another 90 seconds or so to work through that. One thing you probably noticed about this problem as you were going through is that there is no other x term aside from the x squared that you see. That's okay, that's not a typo. That actually simplifies your life just a little bit. So we've got x squared, then I'll group the y's. So y squared plus 18y. I'm gonna leave a little gap so I can complete the square. And I'm gonna put that 80 over on the other side by subtracting the 80. Any questions, comments, concerns? Now I'll complete the square. Half of 18 is 9, so that means I'm going to add what in the little blank I have right here? 81, you square it. And when we're completing the square on circles, as I mentioned last time, I'm just refreshing your memory, we have both sides of the equation to work with. So since I just added 81 on the left, I'm now going to add 81 on the right side of this. So x squared still stands alone. My y's, the two factors of 81 that add up to 18 are 9 and 9. So I have y plus 9 squared. And then negative 80 plus 81 is 1. A little note, this doesn't happen on my test. If it happens on my math lab, I'm not positive. If you end up with a negative number over here when you've completed the square, then it's not a circle. It has to be a positive radius. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. I don't plan to give you that situation, but just in case it pops up on the homework, you never know. So now my center. I've just got that x squared, so that means what's the x coordinate of the center? 0, thank you. The y plus 9 means what's the y coordinate of the center? Negative 9, fantastic. And then the radius, since I have a 1 right here, what does that mean that the radius is? 1. Now remember, we're taking the square root there, even though we're taking the square root there. So it's not 1 because that's 1 explicitly. We have to take the square root and that becomes the same thing. Okay. Any questions about the completing the square process? Okay, so then one other thing, before we do these last two, I've got an example, you've got an exercise. I just want to put up here just a real quick refresher. If I tell you that a circle, it has a center of, let's say 10 and negative 5, and a radius of, let's call it doesn't really matter, a radius of 10, what I want you to do is real quick, find the equation. All this is what we did last time, but I'm just making sure we remember how to do that before we do the next problem. So when I go to put this in center radius form, my first binomial squared is x, then what? Minus 10, that's great. And then we have a plus, and then my binomial for the y's is y plus 5, great. And then on the other side, I have 100, r squared. Remember, if you go to the first page of your sheet that we did in our last session, this is the center radius form of the circle. It's the form that we use most. And so I just wanted to remind you what that is. The key bits of information we need, though, we need a center and we need a radius. Okay, so now we're going to go up to this problem right here, example 4. Example 4 says, find the equation of a circle with center, negative 1, 7. Okay, that's good. I've got the center. But this time I'm making you work a little more. I just don't give you the radius. I tell you that it goes through the point 2, 4. So I have a circle. I've given you the center. I've given you a point it goes through. How can I get the radius? Say it louder. You're 100% right. Whoever said it. Distance formula. Beautiful. Excellent. So distance formula. So the distance between a center and the point, that is the radius. That was the definition. The radius is that distance from the center to a point on the outside of the circle. So I'm going to use the distance formula and I'm going to figure out what the radius is. Then I will have everything I need to come up with the equation of the circle. I like this problem because it's putting us in review mode as we get ready. We got a final exam coming up in just a few days. I know, dreaded. I'm sorry to remind you. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the radius using the distance formula. So the distance between these 2 points is the square root of the difference between the x's squared. So negative 1, oops, that's not a comma, sorry. Negative 1 minus 2 squared. Plus, the difference between the y's is 7 minus 4 squared. So -1 minus 2, that's -3. I'm just taking all the steps here so that when you get home and you're looking at your notes later, because there's problems like this on the homework, you can follow along with what we did in class. 7 minus 4 is 3 squared. So that is 9 plus 9 underneath the radical, which is the square root of 18. Now, if I was just asking you what the radius is, okay, if that's all the information I wanted, at this point, you'd simplify that radical. Okay, 18 is 9 times 2. But I'm just going to give you a little piece of advice. When the bigger question is to find the equation, I don't want the radius per se. I want the equation. I'm just going to save myself a minute. I'm going to leave it because I remember in the equation it's r squared. So I don't really have to undo the square root. But if you did that, that's fine. It's not going to change the answer. All right, so we're ready. I know the center. The center is -1, 7. I know the radius. The radius is the square root of 18, or if you simplified it, it's 3 square root of 2. So now my equation of the circle. In my first binomial, my x's, I have x and then what? +1, that's exactly right. Great job. And then in my second binomial, I've got my y's. So I have y and then what? -7. And then remember, the other side of the equation is the radius squared. So if the radius is square root of 18 or 3 square root of 2, if you simplified it, then what do I get when I square that? 18. And we're done. So last problem from this section, unless you have any comments or concerns we need to talk about, it's the same thing. Just to make sure you're running through it, so I'm going to give you a minute or two to come up with the equation of this circle. So once again, the big task on this problem is I'm given the center, that's information I need, but I'm given a point it goes through rather than the radius. But according to the definition of the circle, the distance between these 2 points is the radius. So I'm going to figure out that distance. So distance formula says first, I'm going to take the difference between the x's. So I have 5 minus a -3, so that becomes 5 plus 3 squared. Then I have the difference between the y's, so 3 minus 2 squared. And when I go and do that squaring, 5 plus 3 is 8 squared, or 64. 3 minus 2 is 1 squared, or 1. So the radius is the square root of 65, which I'm pretty sure does not simplify at all. It's 5 times 13. So even if you tried to simplify it, you can't. So now my equation of the circle, here's my x's. So I'm going to have x and then what? -5. Beautiful. Well done. Then I'm going to have y -3. Yes. You do not get to choose which point. It has to be the center. Okay, that the circle is always defined in relation to the center. And then the other side, the right side of this equation is going to be what? Yep, the square root of 65 squared is 65. And there we go. We are done. That's all I have.